2021 has been an interesting year in terms of gaming, and not just the games that have been released, but the games I've gone back and found out myself. Cruelty Squad was an interesting first-person shooter, commenting on politics and capitalism under the guise of satire. Omori was a dark and gripping nightmare about how people deal with trauma and depression. And now we've stumbled across yet another extremely unique game, coming from an auteur in the indie gaming scene, Daniel Mullins. Unlike the other two games, I've been following Daniel Mullins' work going all the way back to his first big hit, Pony Island. I won't go too much into it because I don't doubt I'll end up talking about it at some point, but Pony Island was the introduction to Daniel Mullins' unique style of creating games, being heavily focused on elements like head-scratching puzzles, 8-bit pixel gameplay, and lots of meta. It's in fact the first thing that comes to mind when thinking of his games, constantly injecting winks and nudges to the player and acknowledging their existence within the actual game world. Pony Island focused on the inner workings of the player's computer, where you have to play ponyisland.exe and eventually end up saving the trapped souls within the game files. What made the game especially excellent to me was that not only is the concept and story very intriguing, but the game mechanics also stand on their own, with new elements constantly being added, and the puzzles being genuine head scratchers. It's an excellent game that I heavily recommend you go and play. Mullins then came out with The Hex, a game which arguably goes even further into these meta elements, whilst also doubling down on his commentary of the game industry. I think this game was very ambitious, letting you take control of several different characters, all with their own unique gameplay segments, commenting on certain tropes in gaming. There's a Mario and Sonic knockoff, a Mortal Kombat knockoff, and also what appears to be a Zelda knockoff, all of which include the appearance of things like Steam reviews and Twitch chats showing people's reaction to the game, usually being negative. I'd say it comments less on the games and more on the developers, buckling under fan and critic pressure, and ultimately making a game which satisfies nobody. With Mullins being an indie developer, there was something that always struck me as extremely personal about this game. Trying your best to make something that pleases people and brings joy into their lives, only to have it shot down and criticised to no end. It's another excellent game that unfortunately didn't get as big as a response as Pony Island did. And after that, Mullins went quiet for a while, until he announced in August 2020 that he was working on a brand new game called Inscryption. The game appeared to be filled with the same amount of mystery than his other games, but seemed like the central gameplay mechanic was going to be focused around cards. Now if like me, you're not particularly a fan of card games like Hearthstone or Magic the Gathering, you may have been a bit worried when seeing this trailer. I've got nothing against these kind of games, I think it's just because I'm not that good at strategizing, and I'm also really impatient. Basically, I don't like them because I'm an idiot. But when the game released, I still bought it on day one. The game starts on a black screen, with only a play button being shown in the center. Upon pressing, we're shown the title cards, until we hear someone speak.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing.
We can presume the character we hear is who we'll be playing as, inserting a copy of Inscryption into his computer and taking us to the title screen. Strangely, upon reaching the main menu, the option of starting a new game is greyed out and appears to be corrupted. Looking at the options menu, there's a surprising amount of customizability in terms of the game's appearance and certain elements like speech and sound. You can choose whether you want certain noise and flicker effects, how fast you want the dialogue to appear, as well as all the standard brightness and resolution options which you'd expect. Starting the game, we emerge in a very dark room, with light only illuminating the wooden table in front of you. I'm just gonna say now, if you were thinking of the FNAF 6 intro like I was, we would be very, very good friends. A set of eyes slowly open in front of us, as we're greeted by this dark figure. Apparently it's been a while since someone has challenged this figure to a game, as he takes us to a tutorial. Despite everything seeming very overwhelming on your first playthrough, I think the tutorial does a good job at setting you up for the game. We first have to play a squirrel card, and follow it up with a stoat card. This is where the mechanic of sacrifices come into play. The blood next to the stoat card signifies how many sacrifices need to be made, and luckily there's only one. Notice how on the squirrel card there's no blood symbol. This is because squirrels are a free card, which you can play at any time, with their main function either being a sacrifice or a one-hit defense. Other cards will vary depending on how many sacrifices need to be made, ranging from 1 all the way up to 4 sacrifices. It can always be seen in the top right of the card, with multiple blood drops letting you know how many you'll need to make in order to play the card. Upon sacrificing, you can place it in any of the 4 card slots on your side, which will come in handy later on. To end our turn, we ring a bell to our left, where the figure then explains the numbers on our card. The number on the left is the card's attack power, and the number on the right is its health, which can be distinguished by the claw and heart markings. The stoat had no other cards in its way, so attack the figure directly, causing us to go up 1 point. This is where the scale is introduced, as 1 tooth is added on the opposite side. Dealing damage to your opponent leads to more teeth being put on their side of the scale. If the scale is pushed all the way down, you win, and vice versa. We're then shown how opposing cards function, with the coyote taking away 2 health points from our stoat. It wasn't enough to deal any damage to our side of the board, however, so the figure ends his turn. We're then given the chance to pick up a new card, either being a random one from our deck or a squirrel. It's always important to have at least 1 squirrel in your hand, just in case you start losing control and can't sacrifice any of the cards on the board. I think it's a very genius move to have this squirrel stack present. As you'll see later in the game, different factors get introduced which can lead to some very high stakes risk-reward moments. If you choose the random card, you'll learn this lesson here, with all of the cards needing 2 sacrifices to be played. Upon playing a squirrel, we can then sacrifice both cards in exchange for this new card. As you can probably assume, cards with a higher blood sacrifice number tend to have higher stats, and certain unique abilities. For example, the River Snapper we just played will work perfectly as a defense item, taking 6 hits to die, whilst also dealing out 1 damage. This may all sound a bit complex, but it's actually very simple in practice. Trust me, if this was too complicated, there's no way I would have been able to get through this game.
Fucking get down.
We eventually end up beating him, and damn, those teeth falling is satisfying. The figure recalls a story of us being lost in a deep forest. The way this was described immediately gave me Dungeons and Dragons vibes, despite me never actually playing the game. It's just the way the dialogue's written, which made me reminiscent of how I've seen it conveyed in other forms of media.
Goodbye.
The first icon in front of us gives us a choice of 2 cards, that being a cat and an adder. This is where the sigils are introduced, with the cat having many lives and the adder having the touch of death. These are explained in the rulebook, which is shown to us upon clicking on either of the cards. Thankfully, you can look at the rulebook at any time, by either clicking on it on the left hand side, or simply right clicking whatever icon you want to learn about. This is where you can start to notice this game's genius design, with everything being intricately crafted and mapped out. As you can see, the adder has the touch of death, meaning that upon damaging any card, they'll be destroyed instantly, no matter what health they're on. When I saw this for the first time, I thought this would be too overpowered and game breaking. However, looking at the adder's health, you can see that the trade-off for this incredibly powerful sigil is that the adder can only take 1 damage. On top of that, the adder also has to have 2 blood sacrifices to be played, meaning it will be harder to get this card on the board in the first place. So many positives and drawbacks, which all balance each other out. We then move to a space with a backpack icon, where the concept of items is introduced to us. We're first given a couple squirrels in a bottle, as well as some pliers. However, as the game progresses, we'll be given a variety of helpful items, like a fan, a pair of scissors, and even exclusive items which return upon every run. We can only hold 3 items at a time, so then have to move to the next space, which is a battle. At the start of this battle, our Stoke card starts having a go. Calm down, man. He's one of 3 cards which can actually talk to you in the game, which we'll touch on more later. This is where we start to get left to our own devices, and start messing around with the game mechanics. We can see there's already some stumps and boulders placed on the board, which serve as a defense for both us and the figure. I actually ended up losing this battle. However, you're not punished for doing so, as you're still learning the mechanics. We're then given the chance to get up from the table and explore the room. I think this is a good time to say that the art style of this game is just phenomenal. It reminded me slightly of the low-res graphics from Cruelty Squad, but look a lot more detailed and fleshed out. Certain details like the glowing particles that float around the table, as well as the lighting in general, add so much to the environment and makes it feel so immersive and lively. We fetch the candlestick by the door and place it on the table. The figure blows out one of the candles. As it becomes clear, these are our lives. We get one chance to mess up, and if we lose again after that, it's game over. We see a couple more cards with different sigils, one being a wolf cub which will upgrade to a wolf card after surviving one turn, and also a sparrow with the airborne ability, which means the card will always attack the figure directly, and ignore any cards in its way. We then come across a strange rune looking icon, where we have to sacrifice one of our cards, as well as placing another card above it. Upon doing so, we can see the sigil of the sacrifice card is then placed onto the other card, which is where you could start to imagine how you could end up breaking the game, with certain overpowered combinations. We're then introduced to the concept of totems, with the figure inscribing all of his canine cards with the airborne sigil. Later on, we'll be given the chance to use totems of our own, being able to mix and match all different kinds of sigils with different creatures. However, for now, we can only see the figure use it. I died once again, which meant it was game over. The figure stretches his hands across the table and grabs us. The first few times this happened, it properly freaked me out. It's so unsettling how close he gets to you, as well as little things like how you can start to see more details in his disgusting greeny hands. We get dragged into the flickering door which we saw when getting up from the table, and are given the chance to create a death card. By using the cards we previously had in our deck, we get to choose 3 elements, that being the cost, the power and health, and also the sigil. Here we can only pick the River Snapper for the cost, which means that to play our death card in the future, we'll need to make 2 sacrifices. We then take the 3 power and 2 health from the wolf, and finally extract the sigil from the wolf card, which means that upon playing the death card, it will upgrade after 1 turn. Once again, depending on which card you get, you could end up with an unbelievably overpowered card. But as you'll see in a second, no matter how good your cards may be, if you aren't playing smart, you'll always end up losing. We can also give our card a name. Of course, Muntlad was the only realistic option in our case. We then get our picture taken, and end up back at the table. It's made clear that upon returning, we aren't the character we were previously playing as, with the figure saying that we are another challenger. Just when you think that you knew everything there was to know, bones are introduced, being another way to put cards on the board. Every time one of your cards either gets killed or sacrificed, you get a bone, which can be seen to the left of you. As you can see here, we have an opossum in our hand, which requires 2 bones to be played. These cards are useful not only in how powerful some of them can be, but also from the perspective that you don't have to sacrifice anything. As long as you have the bones, you can place them down whenever and wherever. There are a few downsides, like if you already have a full row of cards, you won't be able to sacrifice any of them if you only have a bones card. And also, the sheer fact that you're working off currency instead of sacrifices may lead to you getting stuck and not being able to play any cards. Once again, it's the positives and negatives, adding to the amount of possibilities and play styles of different people. I always opted to go for the blood sacrifices, but that's just me. I think another person playing this game could have just as much fun going for these bone cards alone, which just leads to more people being able to do what they want. At the end of this game, the figure explains that if we end up doing more damage than we need to, it actually gives us some rewards in the form of teeth. The teeth aren't just the thing which tip the scale, but also a currency which we can use to purchase certain things. Depending on how many extra points of damage we deal, we're given some teeth in return. The figure tells us to go fetch our figurine by the safe, where we can not only see that the safe is moving, but also that there are several other figurines beside it, feeding into this idea that we aren't the only challengers that have tried to beat the figure at his game. You may have also noticed the hand disappear behind the safe, one of many missable details scattered throughout the game that are sometimes there to give you more information and other times just to freak you out. You can mess about with several things in this cabin, like the candles, this wolf, and this globe. Looking at the rulebook, we can see the code to the safe, and upon unlocking it, are given a new card called the Stink Bug, as well as a key. This card also talks to you, asking about the stoat and the stunted wolf, however is cut off by the figure. The key is used for the box to the left of us, revealing several puzzles inside. I'll be honest, I had no idea what I was doing with these puzzles to begin with. Only upon writing this script have I actually realised how you're supposed to figure these out. Essentially, all you have to do is think about it in terms of the card game, and deal enough damage so it adds up to 5. For example, in this first one, we have 1 that deals 2 damage and 3 that deal 1. This in turn gives us a new card to add to our deck. There's several more of these puzzles which all give you new types of cards, which you can use in future attempts. You can already see that the game's taking the approach of a roguelite type of game, giving you new cards and abilities, as well as just generally learning more about the game on every new attempt. It's best to get all the puzzles out the way here, so that you have access to all these cards sooner. The final puzzle gives us a wooden squirrel's head, similar to the totem carving we saw the figure use earlier. Heading back to the table, we see the stink bug and stoat interact, implying some kind of escape. However, it's still unclear exactly how they got here, or why they're the only cards which can talk. From this point forward, you're more or less left to your own devices, and have to make your way to the end of the game. This is much easier said than done though, with several levels ahead of us, as well as a heap of new cards and abilities that we haven't even seen yet. Let's start with the campfire. This is a space in which you're either given the chance to increase a card's health or power. No matter what card you pick, you'll either be given 2 health up or 1 power up. The interesting part comes after you get your first upgrade, where you're then given the chance to double down and get either another 2 health points or power up. The risk are the tribesmen surrounding the fire, which have a fairly high chance of destroying your card. As I said, the first power-up's always free, and will never destroy your card. However, the introduction of risky extra power-ups lead to several tense moments, where you need to decide whether you want to risk losing your card or play it safe. Along the way, you'll also end up stumbling across the Trapper, who is simply the figure putting on a mask and pretending to be someone else. This is how every character in this part of the game is represented, with many different kinds of creative masks being worn, depending on who you're interacting with. The Trapper sells you pelts in exchange for any teeth you've acquired, selling 3 different types for 3 different prices. These pelts can be used as a defensive item, however can also be traded in for some extra cards later on. I'd say these pelts are useful, but not essential in getting the win, and I oftentimes found myself trying to avoid the Trapper in most occasions. No matter if you buy any or not, he'll always give you a rabbit pelt on the house. Up ahead, we can find the trader, who as I just mentioned, will give you cards in exchange for pelts, varying in rarity depending on which pelts you can offer him. You'll eventually end up reaching the end of the map, and being brought to a boss fight. If you still have 2 candles at this point, one of them will automatically be snuffed out, in turn putting a card known as the Smoke in your hand. This is an extremely helpful card, being able to be placed at any time, and giving you 4 bones upon either being sacrificed or killed. In boss fights, you'll always have only 1 life. However, the boss will have 2 and sometimes even 3 lives before they're defeated. This first boss is called the Prospector, being surrounded by a gloomy light and trees. Fighting this boss is pretty much like any other fight, although there's certain pitfalls to watch out for. As the stoat often tells you, going for the pack mule isn't a bad idea, as it rewards you with a number of cards which can help you out immensely. However, you also want to be careful in the amount of cards you're placing down on the board, as when the Prospector enters his second phase, he'll use his pickaxe to turn any of the cards on your side into gold nuggets. This could either be an advantage or disadvantage depending on how many cards you have in your hand. The gold nuggets serve as a 2-hit defense, so having a couple of these might not be a bad idea. However, having your entire row clogged up by these things gives the Prospector more time to lay some cards down on the table and go on the attack. No matter what happens, you should always be thinking 2 steps ahead and planning out your attacks. After defeating the boss, you're given a selection of 3 rare cards, which can be distinguished by the thorny looking vines around the outside of them. These rare cards typically have certain potentially overpowered sigils, like the Mantis God's 3-direction attack, or the Pack Rat's ability to give you a new item whenever they're placed down. This takes us to the next stage, the Wetlands, which introduces some new elements which will help us out on our journey. First is the strange beast in a cave, who gives us a trial to complete. There's several different trials we're given here, all being based on the stats of your cards. 3 cards will be picked randomly from your deck, and depending on which trial you pick, you'll either pass or fail. For example, here I chose the trial of health, which means that the health points of the 3 cards need to be either equal to or above 6. Luckily, we passed, giving us a new card in the process. These cards aren't necessarily rare, but will always have a new sigil attached to them. If the card already has a sigil, the new one will simply be added on top of the existing one. Up ahead, we can find the woodcutter, who gives you a selection of 3 different creature heads and sigils to choose from. This is where I'd argue you can break the game the most, as I found some of these combinations to be very overpowered, despite me still losing in the process. I think that's just because I'm bad at games. You'll typically get a broken run when pairing the squirrel up with one of the sigils, as the squirrel is usually your most played card and can be placed for free. And finally, we can stumble upon the mycologists, which will take any of your duplicate cards and give you the chance to fuse both of them together, in turn creating a more powerful card. This helps in not only unclogging your inventory, but also perhaps giving more functionality to certain cards which may have once appeared to be useless. And that's about it in terms of the core game mechanics in this segment. There's other variations on things, like being able to choose a card related to a certain type of beast, sacrificing a card for an extra bone at the start of every battle, and also choosing a card from a selection of death cards. There's still some bosses we need to conquer first, but first let's focus on the cabin for a sec. There's a number of items in here which can help you out in making your way to the end, however are hidden behind certain puzzles and steps that may not initially be present. At some point while playing, you'll be given the option to acquire this green goo in a jar, that's simply referred to as a failure. The figure tells you that you can't use that, however if you pick it up and attempt to use it, he'll draw the line and remove it from your items. He places it on a shelf by the door, and when interacting with it, it turns out to be the most sentient jar of snot I've ever seen. He'll talk to you more, and even help you out as you make your way through the game. Remember the puzzles from earlier with the number combinations? Well, if you did all of them, you would have gotten a card known as the Caged Wolf. Suspiciously, there's also a caged wolf propped up behind the figure, and destroying this card in battle will also result in the cage being broken in the cabin. We can then take this wooden figure of the wolf over to the squirrel holding a knife and place it in the hole on the left, in turn giving us the knife. This is one of the essential items you'll want to acquire and will always appear at the start of any new attempt. Using the knife in a battle will cause you to stab out your right eye and place it on the scale. This not only gives you a much greater chance of winning the match and getting you out of a tight spot, but also lets you into another secret. After the battle, you'll be given the chance to pick out a new eye, and if you pick the glowing, futuristic looking one, you'll start to notice things that weren't once present. For example, looking at the clock behind you, we can now see that there's markings over where to put the 3 clock hands. Doing this unlocks the stunted wolf, as well as a roll of film. Interacting with failure when having this eye in makes him describe it as the master's eye, calling out to someone called Magnificus and asking him to free him from the jar. At this point, you've acquired pretty much all of the essential things you'll need in order to win. Now all it takes is some time, skill, and quite a lot of good RNG. That's the thing that you won't see in this video, but the number of failed attempts I had did eventually lead to me getting a bit frustrated. The interesting thing is though, despite some of these deaths coming from very bad RNG, a lot of them I noticed were simply bad plays on my end. Rewatching the footage, I noticed myself placing cards in bad positions and choosing the wrong kinds of risks to make. So although RNG's a factor, I think it will rarely ever make or break your run. An interesting thing you might notice is that after a certain amount of attempts, you'll start to witness the Stoat and Stinkbug cards change in appearance. So much to the point where they literally look nothing like how they started off. The Stoat appears to turn into some kind of robot, and the Stinkbug looks like an old woman. There's a reason to all of this, and a reason that only these cards and the stunted wolf can talk, but we'll touch on that later. There's 3 more bosses you have to tackle before you complete this section. The Angler, the Trapper and Trader, and finally the figure himself, who uses a combination of all the previous masks. The Angler is a fairly easy boss to tackle. In his first phase, he uses primarily airborne and waterborne cards, which attack you directly, and then hide away. meaning that you can't damage them back. This means you'll simply want to be getting off as much damage as possible and beating the first phase quickly. However, much like the Prospector, you might want to be careful how many cards you're putting down, as when he enters his second phase, he'll place a bait bucket in front of every card on your side of the board. Destroying this bait bucket causes a great white to spawn in its place, a very powerful card that can wipe out most cards in only one hit. If you aren't prepared for this, your run could be over in a couple turns, so make sure to limit the amount of cards you're using in the first phase, and just try to end the fight as soon as possible. The Angler's most unique mechanic is his ability to steal one of your cards. He announces when he's about to do this, with whatever card he's about to steal being covered by a white hook. The best strategy here is to place down a squirrel card in front of one of his cards, making it so that one of his lanes are completely blocked off. As I said, it's a fairly easy fight, and mostly relies on you going for the kill as soon as possible. After beating him for the first time, you'll be rewarded with a hook at the start of every new run, making it so that you can steal one of his cards in the future. The Trapper and Trader could potentially give you a bit more trouble. The first phase is taken by the Trapper, who lays out several robotic frogs and traps. Every time you defeat one of these frogs, they turn into a leaping trap, and upon damaging one of the traps, you'll lose your card immediately. This might seem a bit unfair, but it in fact may help you out to sacrifice some of your cards to these traps, as when you do this, you'll get a free wolf pelt, which you'll be able to use for great effect in the next phase. There's not any particular strategy I could piece together for this battle, but the way I usually approached it was try get some cards in my hand that will be able to end the battle in a matter of turns, and in the meantime try to get as many wolf pelts as possible so I can dominate the second phase. Just make sure to be thinking ahead, as I think this is one of the first fights that could really mess you up if you aren't paying close attention. In the second phase, the Trapper turns around his mask and becomes the Trader, giving you the chance to trade your pelts for some cards on his side. Of course, if you can't trade him anything, then you've most likely already lost. But even just taking a couple of his cards, you'll be able to win quite easily. You can take whichever card you want, although if you think you could wipe him out in one turn, I suggest taking some cards from the front so you don't have to be held back by any creatures standing in the way. This takes us to the final stage, which in my playthrough took me around 3 to 4 hours to reach, with many failed attempts in between. At no point did I feel bored or wanted to give up though. I understand if some people don't like this approach in a game, but retrying the tricky things over and over for me was satisfying, as I learnt more about the game's mechanics, and became familiar with how certain functions play out, deciding what's a good or bad play, or what risks I should take or not take. The final map only has 3 different directions you can go to, either sacrificing a card and putting a sigil on another one, getting some items, or trading in your pelts. At this point, if you've only managed to scrape by, you're most likely not going to survive this final battle. That is unless you get very lucky in relation to the boons. In this final segment, you're transported to a dark forest, where you have to walk forward until you're presented with a table. Much like the cave spaces on the board, you're given the chance to prove yourself in a variety of trials. These ones are slightly more specific, so are harder to actually achieve. However, if you do end up passing one, you'll have the opportunity to take one of these very powerful boons. These give you abilities like being able to draw twice at the start of a game, being able to pick whatever cards you want from your deck, and also starting your game with a powerful line of defense. You're given 2 opportunities to earn one of these boons. However, if you fail both times, the game still continues. It's possible to beat this final boss with no boons, however it does make everything a whole lot harder. As I said before, this final boss switches between all the previous masks you've battled, which makes everything very difficult. For example, you could be about to beat a phase, and then have all of your cards turned into gold nuggets. Something that in this final battle could completely destroy your run. The first phase is like your standard battle, however in the second phase he uses your death cards against you. As you can see in this run, my death cards had the airborne ability and were very powerful, so not only did they not destroy any of the gold nuggets, giving me no time to attack, they also absolutely obliterated me. That's the only thing I think might be a bit unfair about this section. You're never told that this would happen, obviously, so to have cards like Muntflunk, incredible name, start attacking against against me, it's pretty much like I can't win, as the card will always win in one move. If you do manage to beat the first 2 phases, the figure turns the moon into a card, garnering 40 health, 1 attack, and some new sigils we've never seen before. Luckily for me, when I eventually beat this boss, I had a card with Touch of Death, meaning the moon got wiped out in 1 hit. After beating the final boss, we once again hear the character we're playing as celebrate our win.
I think I just beat him! Oh.
Let's not forget, we're playing as someone who's playing this game. In front of us, there's some kind of meat pile with a candle in it. However, before we interact with the figure, we cut to what appears to be the real world for a brief second, before cutting to black. Now, with everything we've just touched on, you might still be confused. Where actually are we? Why are we playing cards with some random guy? What happens to all the previous challenges? What's the significance of the stoat, stinkbug, and stunted wolf? And why does this mean anything? All those questions will be answered. However, first, let's look at what happens after this cut to black. We're taken to what appears to be some sort of video archive, with several videos featuring what appears to be the person we're playing as. Let's take a deep dive into this first set of videos, and see if we can discover anything new. The first 2 videos were filmed on the 15th of September. The first one is an accidental recording that was taken while setting up the camera. However, the second one has a lot more info on who we've been playing as, and what he does with his time.
Hey there, card gamers. I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is another pack opening video. Today, I am opening Catch Monsters packs and digging for that epic, shiny Transcend Dog! And here I'll add some crazy VFX with lightning bolts or something. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am about to open my first pack. Feeling good about this one. Feeling real good. Ooh, what do we got here? Okay, and our first rare is a Urchin. Not exactly a viable competitive card, but hey, it's a pretty one. All right, next pack. Feeling even better about this one. I gotta say, these cards are feeling extra silky today. I mean, they're so smooth. Not sure what they're doing down there at the card factory, but these are feeling good in my hands. Okay, let's see what we got here. Some jank cards, maybe a few additions to my draft cube, we'll see. And our rare for this pack is Bandog. Not exactly riveting so far, but we have many packs to go. Next pack, here we come. Just cut out this part.
Our character appears to be some kind of YouTuber, with his content focusing on card pack openings. This of course is in reference to the huge amount of YouTubers whose main content focuses on pack openings and collecting cards. This video is here to essentially set the scene, and let us know who we've been playing as and what he likes to do. He gets cut off by a ringing phone, and ends the video. It's unclear whether he finished the video or not. However, the next videos are taken weeks later, on the 2nd of October.
Hey there, card gamers! I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is a vintage pack opening video. Today I'm opening a few super rare old packs I snagged at a garage sale. I've got 4 packs of Inscryption. You would not believe the deal I got on these. Now, not all of you will even remember this game. I'm barely old enough to have seen these going around in my childhood. For whatever reason, they only did 1 set of these cards and then stopped printing them. There's not a huge market for them anymore, but at the rate I got them for, there's not really much to lose. That being said, a foil Mantis God goes for a couple $100, so. And our rare for this pack is Blue Mage. Cool looking card, but not going to be worth very much. This pack has been opened and resealed. Hope no one snuck the rare out of it. That would suck. Come on, people, honestly. Who opens and reseals a pack? Yeah. there's a set of coordinates on this card. Looks like they were drawn on with a pen. 49 degrees north, 123 degrees west. I think I'd have to check, but I think that's pretty nearby.
Just like a classic creepypasta, the lucky carder has found 4 super rare packs of Inscryption being sold at some random garage sale. He explains that the Inscryption cards came out when he was a kid, and that after only 1 set, they randomly stopped being printed. He even explains that there isn't even a huge market for these cards, being seen more as pointless anomalies as opposed to really rare cards. Interestingly, one of the packs have been opened and resealed, and when looking through the cards, he finds a card with a set of coordinates written on it. The location is apparently nearby where he lives, but before he elaborates any further, he gets up and turns off the camera, assumedly being a bit freaked out at what he's just found.
Alright you guys, I'm out here living my best life. Got my trusty headlamp and shovel. Always come prepared, kids. Whew. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Whew. Getting close. I think. Assuming there is a thing to get close to. This very well may be a massive waste of...
We can see that the lucky carder took action straight away, journeying into the woods to try track down these coordinates. As he starts to explain his thoughts on the situation, the video corrupts, with the next video being completely corrupted as well.
Alright. That's why you always bring an extra battery, boys and girls. Every time. You gotta come prepared. Okay. All right. This is it. And now we dig. I give a 75% chance it's a rock. But only one way to find out. What the fuck is that? Oh my god, you guys, I can't believe it. There's actually something here. What? What the fuck? Guys, are you seeing this? I'm a little confused.
Luckily, we can see he managed to track down the coordinates, and upon digging in the spot that was marked, finds a copy of Inscryption on a floppy disk. He takes it and makes his way out the forest. We then get one video showing him buying a floppy disk drive and another showing him launching the game onto his computer, where we can assume was the moment where we first took control. So now we know that everything we just played was from a random floppy disk which our character found by following some coordinates marked on a pack of Inscryption. Once we exit the video library, we're brought right back to the game, where we're once again congratulated on our win. The figure tells us to come with him and brings us back to the flickering door, this time being completely visible. We grab the camera to the left of us and put the film roll in it, as the figure starts to get angry and tells us to put it down. He launches himself onto us. However, before he can do anything, we take a picture, which in turn makes him disappear. With the room now being fully illuminated, we can look at the failed challengers piled up in the corner of the room, as well as the figure, who's now trapped in a card, and finally the new game option, which was greyed out at the start of the game. Upon picking it up, everything goes dark, with no other option than to quit back to the main menu. This time we can select the new game option, taking us to a game with a completely different style, starting off with an intro cutscene. 4 characters known as the scribes are introduced here, one of which appearing identical to the figure we've been playing cards with, and the other 3 having likenesses to the stoat, stinkbug and stunted wolf. It's explained that these 4 created magical cards all in their own unique way. Grimora used her quill to inscribe the epitaphs of the dead. The figure, who we now know is called Leshy, used his wildlife camera to capture beasts. PO3 used a particle scanner to copy the CPUs of robots. And finally, Magnificus used his brush to paint his wizard pupils. Let's not forget Failure from earlier calling out to Magnificus and referring to him as his master, perhaps telling us that he's the most powerful of these 4. One day, a challenger arrives in their land with the motivation to replace one of the scribes. This takes us to the actual game, which literally made my jaw drop. I genuinely thought I'd completed the game when beating Leshy at cards, but it appears that not only have we got a lot more to go, but also that it's taking the form of a completely different style of game, taking the approach of an 8-bit pixel art world that we're gonna journey through. We first have to choose a starting deck from one of the 4 scribes, which also translates to which scribe we want to replace. I don't think it makes too much difference, as you'll be visiting all 4 of them anyway, but I chose Leshy's starting deck anyway. As we leave, our character interjects and simply asks, "What is this?" Which I've got to be honest, was the exact same thing I said when starting this new game. I first visited Leshy in the cabin that we're already familiar with. We try to challenge him to a battle. However, he tells us that before we fight, we'll first need to beat the prospector, the angler, and the trapper. In the cabin, we can interact with the same puzzle and safe as last time. The safe giving you a pile of meat, presumably what was given to us upon beating Leshy the first time, and inside the puzzle we get a pack of cards containing different kinds of beasts. I'll be 100% honest, if you thought the start of this game was overwhelming, the introduction here for me was downright confusing. You're given numerous packs of cards, with lots of types you've never seen before. By pressing tab, you can look at all the cards you have, and either pick which ones you want to use, or use the autocomplete option. I found the process of choosing my cards too convoluted and confusing, so ended up always using the autocomplete option whenever I acquired some new cards. It won't hinder you in any way, and I think it chooses the best selection out of your collection anyway, so I suggest just using that option if you get a bit confused like I did. Talking about being confused, I had no idea what to do in this first area, so just decided to go to the crypt area in the bottom right instead. It's partly down to me being dumb, but I can't deny at the same time the change in style is very confusing, and sort of on purpose just lets you discover things on your own. In the crypt, you're greeted by Grimora, scribe of the dead. She's locked behind 3 tombs, which require epitaphs in order to be unlocked. There's 3 skeletons that you need to fight in this area, that upon beating them will describe who they were and how they died. This is where we can see how the combat works in this section, which as I already said, is much more confusing than the original game. Everything's now shown in a pixel art style, with plenty more icons and numbers on the screen that you might not be familiar with. We'll explain those more when we get to them, but as you can see in this first fight, this time if we deal an excess amount of damage, we're given foils instead of teeth. And when interacting with the trader in this section, we can see that we can buy new packs of cards and specific cards with these foils. Although I never really felt like I needed any extra cards on top of the ones I acquired during my battles. After defeating these skeletons, they all give us a pack of deathly cards, which mostly feature cards which require bones. The bones still function the same, but what you might notice are some cards with blue icons on them. These require energy to be played, an entirely new mechanic that's not introduced at all, I don't think. After every turn, you're given an extra energy slot, which you can see on the top left side of the battle screen. You have a maximum of 6 energy slots, which gradually unlock as the battle progresses. On top of getting an extra slot, after every turn, your energy also fully refills. It's similar to how the bones work, but is less reliant on making sacrifices and saving up currency. As I said though, in this segment, this stuff is barely explained, so I don't blame you if you just ended up throwing random cards onto the board and seeing what would happen. After you defeat all the skeletons and collect the epitaphs, you can go to the tombstones and put all the epitaphs in the right order. Doing this unlocks a boss fight with Grimora. Grimora has an interesting mechanic, where after defeating her first phase, she'll kill all of your cards on the board and give them back to you as a one-hit defense item. Ultimately, you've just got to keep laying down as many cards as you can until you eventually win. Beating Grimora lights a beacon back at the start, as well as giving us a couple packs of deathly cards. We then travel to the futuristic factory in the top left, where we come across PO3. He mocks the cards in your collection, and sends you to go fight 3 of his men before he'll even accept your challenge. These areas bring back some of the head-scratching puzzles I remembered from Pony Island, in the form of these conduits. Even after completing them, I'm still not quite sure how they work, but as I said, I am an idiot. I was stuck on some of these for upwards of 10 minutes, trying all kinds of combinations. These were never frustrating though, and made me engaged instead of annoyed. In this area, you'll be given techno card packs, which feature more energy-based cards. It's the same process as last time, battling 3 fellas and then fighting the boss. But interestingly, you may notice that some of these robots are seemingly being forced to do things that they don't want to do. This final one talks about sacrificing himself, but in between his normal text, we see brief glimpses of panicked red text flash up for a brief second. After beating everyone, we head back to PO3, who also features an interesting mechanic. This time, the board is shown as a conveyor belt, moving our cards after each turn. This means that both his and our cards can alternate sides, so you'll be wanting to pay attention to your positioning closely. Like all of the fights in this section, I wouldn't say it was that hard. I was simply auto-completing my deck each time I got new cards, and then throwing as many as I could onto the board. It's a shame that I didn't have to think as much about my actions during this section, but it was still fun nonetheless. In his second phase, PO3 will also scan one of your cards and fill all his empty spaces with the same card. This could potentially give you some trouble, but I managed to beat him pretty easily anyways. As we attempt to make our way to the next section, our battery is apparently low, taking us out of the game and back to the video archive. Here we see a number of new clips that were taken days after the Lucky Carder first played Inscryption.
I think I've just got to send it. To whom it may concern. It's a bit formal. Hello there! Exclamation point. My name is Luke Carter, and I'm a fan of your collectible card games. If you've ever taken a look at my YouTube videos, you will know how appreciative I am of the merch that you've sent me over the years. So it was a great surprise to learn that there is a digital version of Inscryption. I think maybe one of my fans pranked me and buried a copy in the woods near my house. Upon further research, however, I have not been able to find any record of this game. Is this some kind of elaborate hoax? Any trace of this game? Is this some kind of elaborate hoax? The game doesn't seem like the work of a prankster. It at least appears professionally made. I am both puzzled and excited by this discovery. Any information you can provide would be much appreciated. Thank you, the Lucky Carter. Okay, good enough. Sent.
In this first video, we can see the lucky carder, who we now know is called Luke Carder, draft an email about this digital version of Inscryption. It's unclear from the first video who he's sending this to. However, if we check the official Inscryption website, we can actually look at these emails in more detail. It appears he's sending the email to a company called Game Funa, who presumably are one of the lead card distributors out there. Luke questions the eligibility of the game, and wants to find out if it's something created by a prankster or some long lost game that was never properly released.
Hey card gamers, I'm the Lucky Carter, and this, well, it's a bit of a strange video. It's actually more of a question to my audience. As I've learned over the years, nobody knows card games better than you guys do, so I'm hoping someone can help me out here. Did anyone ever play an Inscryption video game? Or hear about it? I'm talking about that vintage one-set card game I opened packs for last week. I don't know what I'm allowed to say. I don't want to get in any trouble here. I think I've got the only known copy of the digital version of Inscryption. I've been filming myself playing it, and it's weird, guys. I don't want to get in any hot water by showing the footage, but can someone please prove me wrong? Please tell me someone has a copy of this game. I have been looking online for days and I cannot find a word about it. I reached out to the publishers hoping maybe they would get back to me, but as a fallback, I got you beautiful viewers. Can hopefully dig up something. That's it. That's the video today, guys. Thank you so much, as always. And, oh yeah, what the fuck is the card?
It seems that after only one day, Luke has started to get impatient and desperately wants to discover more about this version of Inscryption, so decides to reach out to his audience in hope of gaining some new answers to his burning questions. He's wary about how much he says, worried that he might get into trouble if he reveals too much. However, simply asks his audience. Right at the end of the clip, he asks,
Yeah, what the fuck is the card?
Before being cut off. It's unclear how or why this happened, but it's undeniable that it seems intentional.
Mr. Carter, we have received your inquiry regarding a digital version of our intellectual property Inscryption. I can assure you that no such software exists in any official form. However, if you have indeed come into possession of proprietary Game Funa hardware, you are compelled to return it to us under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The hardware will be considered stolen if it is not returned to us within a reasonable time frame. Please carefully package the hardware and paste the attached shipping label to the front of the box. You may mail the package at a local post office. We would like to avoid taking legal action in your case, so please do not delay in returning the proprietary software. Sincerely, Game Funa, Customer Happiness Department. What the fuck?
It appears that within a day, Game Funa have responded to Luke's email, taking a very serious and formal tone. They deny the existence of any digital version of Inscryption, however seem very cagey about having this supposedly fraud game out in the public, even if it's owned solely by Luke. They let him know that if he doesn't return the game within a reasonable time frame, it will be considered stolen, and they'll have to take further action in acquiring the floppy disk. This clearly shocks Luke, ending the video off with a nice and tasty,
What the fuck? I think this woman's actually from Game Funa. She came to my door yesterday and I didn't answer. This time I'm gonna record it. Hi!
Hi there.
Hey.
I'm floppy disk for a game called Inscryption. I was told you came by a copy of it somehow. Sound familiar?
No.
No?
No, I don't know anything about that.
Really?
Inscryption, you said?
Yes.
No, I don't think so.
Really? Because, apparently you emailed us about it. You are, Luke Carter, right?
Oh.
You know the luckycarter@gmail.com?
Yeah, you know what? That's, I am Luke Carter, but that's not my email address.
Really? Because, I just noticed because I've seen your videos.
Oh!
I'm a big fan.
Well, thanks for watching.
Listen, how did you know where I live exactly?
My boss gave me your address.
And how did you get past the side gate? It's locked.
Okay, Luke. I'm going to give you my business card. And if you remember anything at all, feel free to give me a call. Okay?
Will do. Take care.
What the fuck?
This video starts with Luke being very panicked about a woman at his door. He suspects she's from game Funa and wants to capture anything that happens on his camera. The clip takes place 2 days later from when he received the email asking for the game, showing us that he hasn't returned it yet, and by the looks of it has overextended what game Funa considered to be a reasonable time frame. When answering the door, it turns out Luke was right, as the woman asks about the floppy disk with Inscryption on. Surprisingly, Luke starts to get defensive and pretends that he doesn't have it, and claims that he's never even heard of the game. The woman catches him out on his lie though, not only reading him back his full name, but also stating that she's a fan of his videos. He tries to change his story by saying that the email which was sent to them was not from his email address. However, she doesn't buy it. Luke starts questioning how she knew where he lived, and how she got past his locked gate, but the woman simply gives him her business card and tells him to call her if he remembers anything. She of course knows he has the game, so this is essentially a final warning to Luke, telling him that if he doesn't give the game back, further action will have to be taken.
Hey there, card gamers! I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is another pack opening video. Today I'm opening Secrets of Legendaria, hoping for that sweet, sweet foil Valamir.
In this final video, we can see Luke's motivation to open packs of cards has dwindled. Whether it be due to his stress around the situation with Inscryption, or perhaps his uninterest in anything else, it's clear that he can't focus on what he usually loves to do. This takes us back to the game, entering the tower in the bottom left. There's a note on the floor when we enter, with it making us aware that we'll once again have to battle 3 enemies before fighting the boss, this time being the final scribe, Magnificus. In this area, we'll be using the monocle that's on the table to make our way to the top, whilst also being introduced to another game mechanic in the form of gems. I'd argue in saying that these were the most confusing combat element for me, being introduced way late into the game, and being slightly more complex than the energy bar. Essentially, there's 3 different types of gems: Sapphire, Ruby, and Emerald. Certain cards will give you these gems, which will in turn either activate other cards with corresponding gems, or give them an upgrade. On the way up to the boss, I never actually ended up using any of these cards. However, you can see on the opposing side, some gem-related cards being used. Once again, when it came time to use these cards, I essentially was just throwing stuff onto the board for the sake of it. It's not that I'd lost interest in the game, I think it's just the fact that none of this stuff is really explained in any detail. It makes you appreciate the tutorial at the start of the game, which lays out the initial foundation very well. We eventually end up reaching Magnificus. However, before battling him, we can read a note lying on his table. The note is to Grimora, talking about PO3's plan apparently going overboard. An idea known as the Great Transcendence is mentioned, and will apparently have catastrophic and unpredictable results. Whatever this Great Transcendence is, we still don't know. Interacting with Magnificus, he appears to be talking more in metaphor and riddles, calling us the brush, and telling us that the artist moves us with a terrifying mastery, perhaps quite literally referring to us the player, managing to battle our way through all the tough enemies that once lied in our path. This takes us into the battle, where Magnificus removes all the previous sigils from our cards, and instead replaces them with some brand new ones. This is essentially the only mechanic this fight has, with his second phase simply being him adding new sigils to his cards as well. It's a fairly simple fight, however you've got to appreciate all the different kinds of art styles and creative cards which have been exclusively made for each individual section. After the battle, Magnificus tells us about his eye, and how apparently it was removed by Leshy, Leshy. This would make sense considering how we found his eye earlier in the game inside Leshy's box of eyes. Magnificus tells us that there's a lot worse things that could happen than simply losing his eye, however. But before he can tell us who and what to look out for, he's cut off and disappears. Finally, we make our way back to Leshy and have to battle him. His boss fight is fairly standard, quite similar to how you played in the initial segment of the game. However, during the fight, he'll take several photos of your cards and piece them together. In the second phase of the fight, he'll take all of your cards away and replace them all with the several copies of the pieced together card. It won't give you too much trouble though, and after the fight, he gives us some packs to open. However, as we try to leave, PO3 comes in and mocks Leshy for his loss. He talks about being back here again, and that they would have been here sooner if the disc wasn't lost. Once again, the characters within the game can recognize that they're trapped within a floppy disk, with the challenges which were mentioned at the start of the game possibly being different people like Luke, who stumbled across this disc of Inscryption and tried to find out all the secrets it held. PO3 says he's done being Leshy's pet, whilst putting a picture of the stoat onto his screen, and leaves the cabin. Leshy says he pushed it too far last time, and that living as a beast is a noble thing, even as a lowly stout. This makes it clear that these characters are seemingly taking separate turns at controlling the game. When we first played Inscryption, Leshy was the scribe who was in control, which is why all of these other scribes were being portrayed as animals, and everything was set within the cabin. It seems now that we're about to witness a switch in power dynamics, with you besting all of the other scribes. We head back to the start, and are given the choice of what scribe we want to replace. I chose to replace Leshy, however from my understanding, the game plays out pretty much the same no matter who you choose. Leshy appears in front of us, chastising us for the choice we made. PO3 appears beside him, and seems to make Leshy disappear, asking us to play with him. We're then brought into a battle, however when we destroy one of the cards, it's replaced with a black corrupted mess. Attacking again leads to the entire game corrupting, with error codes filling the screen, and PO3 sounding enthusiastic about what's happening. We emerge to see PO3 rendered back in 3D, much like Leshy was at the start of the game. It appears that PO3 has taken back control of the game, and wants you to play under his rules. This takes us to a section which almost merges the previous two sections of the game together. We're back in 3D, however still have to interact with this hologram on the table. PO3 sets his game up pretty much like the last section, saying we have to slay 4 Uber bots in order to perform the Great Transcendence. If we try to get up from the table, it's shown that our hands have been locked down, meaning that playing the game is our only option. We keep heading forward until we engage in a battle. The layout here is much more familiar to the first part of the game, with several floppy disks to our right, serving as the random deck and squirrels, this time being replaced with more technological creatures, as well as more futuristic versions of the bell and scales. There's now 5 spaces on the board, greatly expanding the possibilities of what both you and PO3 can do to win. All of the cards in this section are brand new and work off solely energy, as opposed to blood or bones. I'd argue in saying this section gets slightly more creative than the initial section, having cards like the sniper bot, which lets you use your mouse to target specific enemies anywhere on the board, and also having several different kinds of sigils attached to these cards. The squirrels are replaced with empty vessels, which you'll find become much more useful as the game goes on. Essentially like last time, you're gonna have to make your way to 4 separate sections and defeat 4 different bosses. Along the way, you'll stumble across cash, which you can use in a store, as well as several random cards which you can add to your collection. I'd say the game becomes much more linear than the initial section, due to how it moves away from the roguelite elements. However, it doesn't make it any less engaging. We eventually end up reaching a waypoint on the right hand side of the board. However, the power gets shut down immediately after. after. We're then given the opportunity to explore our environment and turn the power back on. We have to solve a couple puzzles to unlock a bridge to the power, getting a battery and bringing it back to the table. This brings us back to the game, where we get introduced to an interesting kind of battle. At certain points, you'll essentially have to battle against time, as PO3 gives you a countdown. There's a container to the left of us, and all you have to do is deal enough damage so the container is full. It seems stressful at first, but I never actually ended up losing to one of these battles. Just use the cards that give off the highest amount of damage and you'll be fine. There's several reworkings to the mechanics in the first section, letting you give certain cards specific sigils, sacrifice some in exchange for others, and all that kind of stuff which we've already seen. You'll eventually come up against the first Uberbot, which serves as our first boss fight. I'd argue in saying most of these Uberbots are my favourite fights in the game, introducing clever and very fourth wall breaking elements into their fights. For example, in this first boss fight, its main mechanic is to tap into your actual computer files and essentially ask you to choose one to win. Not only is this very cool, but pretty confusing. It's unclear what you're searching for and what file you should pick. On my first attempt on this boss, I simply chose a random JPEG to see if it would pop up somewhere, and amazingly it actually did. We then see that in exchange for this file, we've been given a single cube on the scale, with the Uberbot labeling it as a small file. On the second go round, I knew that we'd need to find some large files, so decided to use a large video file. Upon rewatching the footage, it also appears that the bigger the text size, the bigger the file is. So just scroll through your files until you see a file with huge font. This file was over 3 gig, and gave me a huge cube to weigh down the scale. He'll ask you a couple more times to pick a large file, and upon doing this, you beat the first phase. At the start of the second phase, he'll ask you to choose a file that shows age. So I picked a random Vegas file from 2018. Only after you pick the file will he turn it into a card, and tell you that if the card dies, the file will actually get deleted from your computer. I know this sounds incredibly cool, and I'm sorry to be a killjoy, but this doesn't actually end up happening. If the file card dies, you'll simply get a text file explaining that he tried to delete it, but doesn't actually have the power to, encouraging you to play by the rules and delete the file yourself. Interestingly, if you pick Inscryption.exe, as well as Pony Island and the Hex, you'll get a unique piece of text for each. Anyways, beating the Uberbot causes a beacon to turn on, just like the last section, and as a reward, we're given some extra money and an upgrade to our empty vessels. After every boss, we're given one of these upgrades, eventually turning the empty vessel into one of the most useful items to play. Upon doing this, red text flashes on the screen letting us know the memory card is full, as the game shuts off once again, taking us back to the video archive.
Well, hello there, card gamers. Looks like my garage sale hunting days have finally paid off. Yeah. Yeah, baby. Wait till you guys see this. You know what that is? You know what that is? Vintage packs of Inscryption. 4 of them. I don't know if the woman knew what these are worth. I mean, I felt a little bad buying them off of her. But I mean, she's probably doing okay living in this part of town. I mean, it's like, it's a nice part of town, you know? And she would have thrown them away if I hadn't come by. Right? Right. Okay. Big pack opening video incoming! Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo!
This first video is a flashback to the day Luke acquired the packs of Inscryption, simply reminding us where this entire mystery began, and where he got the cards from.
Okay. Time to get to the bottom of this. Hello? Hi, hello, is this Mrs. Hobbs? Hi, my name is Luke. Well, it's very nice to speak with you as well, Mrs. Hobbs. Listen, I was at your garage sale the other day and No, everything's fine, thank you. I was just wondering if you remember those playing cards that you sold me? Those... Yes, those ones. Inscryption, yes. They were your daughter's? Would it be possible for me to speak with her? She passed, isn't she? Oh. Oh, no, I'm so sorry. Oh, it was a while ago. That's still terrible. Oh, it's nothing really. I'm sorry to have bothered you, ma'am. Her name was Casey. That's a lovely name. Sorry, what? She worked for Inscryption? I mean, she worked for Game Funa? Ma'am, would it be possible? I see. Okay, yeah. Do you think it'd be alright if I called you back later? I'm just trying to get to the bottom of something. Okay. Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Alright, have a good dinner. Bye.
In this second video, we can see Luke phoning up the woman who sold him the packs of Inscryption, perhaps as a way to get some answers on all the strange things which have been happening around him. They were apparently the woman's daughter's cards, as it's revealed that she actually died a while ago. The woman tells Luke that her daughter's name was Casey, a name which may ring some bells if you were paying close attention. The name Casey has been brought up before, in the form of the death cards from the first part of the game. It's unclear exactly what this means, and why her name's here, but the fact it's alluded that she died in some kind of accident in a clip later on makes us perhaps think that her death had something to do with this game. It's also revealed that Casey worked for Game Funa, and before Luke can ask the woman more questions, we can see that she has to go eat dinner. Luke simply asks if he can call her back later and wishes her well.
These articles mention death or injury. Oh my god. No one was killed at the facility, though tragically young video game developer Casey Hobbs died from fire-related complications. Fuck. She was working late at the facility performing quality assurance on behalf of her employer, Game Funa.
Here we see Luke researching Casey's death, with her cause of death being associated with fire-related complications. Towards the end of this clip, we see Luke turn around to the camera with a shocked expression on his face, before turning it off. In the time between the last video, we can see Luke is now surrounded by several notebooks and has placed several sticky notes on his monitor. It seems he's taking a deep dive into Game Funa and the surroundings around Casey's death. He once again looks at the camera and turns it off, possibly with the camera capturing things that Luke didn't even intend to record.
Someone is here. My phone's in the other room, so if I die before I can call 911, use this tape as evidence.
Luke started recording in the middle of the night after hearing someone walking around his house. He explains that he'll use the video as evidence in case he dies when trying to get his phone from the other room. However, before we can see anything, the video cuts off. These final two error videos do hold a couple secrets though. The first one briefly shows a note with a bunch of random words and symbols written on it. Even from the words we can make out, like perhaps, blood, and box, it's still unclear what this note means. The final video shows Luke manically laughing while sitting at his table and putting some dice on a scale. It's unclear exactly what this means. However, it could simply be showing Luke's descent into madness. This is where the ARG starts to really come into play, with many people looking very deep into this game and discovering secrets both in and out of it. It's all very interesting when looking into it, but can appear pretty confusing. I think this would be a good time to mention that there's a huge amount of secrets in this game, even having a whole separate ARG being attached to the game. There's so many secrets that I couldn't find them all on my first run. There's an excellent video by Sift, or SIFD, I don't know how to say it, who managed to compile all the secrets from all the acts. The secrets we want to currently focus on, however, are the ones contained inside this final section. If you move your mouse around each room, you may stumble across an arrow which will take you to a secret room. These rooms contain items which can help you, but more importantly, contain information that can help us piece together what's going on. Unlocking a lock within one of these rooms causes a door to be opened to the left of you, and when entering, you'll see a digital version of the trader. He'll show you some cards, which the trader explains has been extracted from old data. This old data was created before Inscryption was put onto the floppy disk, and gives us some more insight on characters like Casey, as well as bringing us something known as the Carnoffel Code. Casey is explained to have helped create Inscryption, being one of the developers to work on the game. It's revealed that one of Grimora's ghouls holds her name, perhaps making us think that the other random names which we saw given to death cards were maybe the other developers. The Carnoffel Code is explained as being terrible, a curse which haunts the game's code and corrupts the files within it. Within these cards, it's shown that these scribes are well aware of their digital existence, and focus a lot of their time on trying to piece together the creation of their world and the people that are responsible. So, to recap, the Carnoffel Code is essentially an evil virus which haunts the floppy disk, and Casey is one of many developers who worked on this game. Okay, with all that out the way, let's tackle these last 3 Uberbots. The second fight is actually fairly straightforward, featuring a robot which will take photos of the board and give you the chance to erase some of the moves either made by you or PO3. I never really ended up using this mechanic though, and just tried to go for the kill as soon as possible. The third Uberbot makes you select certain rules for the game, like having something happen whenever a new turn starts or when a card dies. It's a very interesting mechanic, and can lead to certain plays where you're just sitting and watching some madness happen for about a minute. However, just like the other fights, throwing all of your best cards on the board is pretty much the most effective strategy in getting the win. The final boss is very cool, but terrible in terms of any video making platform. It essentially taps into your Steam friends and turns them into cards. It's very cool, but obviously I can't show them on the screen. I was more intrigued at how I haven't talked to any of these people in a good year now. Well, I mean, there's only one person who won't mind his card being shown. Perfection. Despite being one of the coolest, I'd argue it's the most standard battle of the lot, as it works more off the shock of seeing your friends, and is much more like a regular encounter. You do also get the chance to create some cards of your own, with Big Fat Boy making me laugh a lot more than I like to admit. Upon beating this last Uberbot, PO3 reminds us that the Great Transcendence is close, however gets a notification that a security camera is busted, and sends us to go fix it. Making our way there, assuming you already did the puzzles in this room, you'll now be able to access the terminal which once said waiting for network. Doing so makes you seemingly descend into the floor, emerging with the 3 scribes surrounding you. They all make you aware that they don't think the Great Transcendence is a good idea, putting each other's differences aside for a greater cause. They intend on stopping PO3's plan, and want to use us as bait. If we keep playing with him, and bring him close to the Great Transcendence, he'll hopefully ignore the security cameras, and give Leshy time to strike. We make our way back to the start, as PO3 starts to reveal his true intentions. As he starts to explain, he shows Luke inside his monitor, letting us know that he's tapped into our webcam. This is where it's revealed that the Great Transcendence is simply PO3's way of saying releasing the game to a wide market. By battling the 4 Uberbots, we put our own spin on things, and helped complete the game. We let him access our hard drive, took photos for the store page, and let him connect to the web so that he can upload the files to everyone. As he starts to upload the game to the world, Leshy creeps up behind PO3 and tears his head off, stopping the upload. We're then told that we can now reset the game again, perhaps giving another scribe the chance to play the game their way. However, before we can select it, Grimora picks up the floppy drive and ends up deleting all the files contained within it, which also means that they're quite literally deleting themselves. Grimora explains it's for the best, and is the ultimate freedom, as well as saying that even ignoring the game, there's certain things contained on this disc that need to die, most likely referring to the old data, which we only got a glimpse of. of. This leads to us falling into a body of water, with the box still being left on the screen, showing the deletion process. PO3's head floats past, as a huge amount of errors start filling up the screen. We're then brought to Grimora's crypt, placing PO3's name in the tombstone and challenging her to a final game. Grimora rejoices the end, as we take control of a character on a chessboard. I have to praise the fact that this segment lasts for about 5 minutes, and still has as much personality and character as every other section. The cards are in the shape of gravestones, and have unique artwork to them, and even have unique attack animations. I truly believe all of these sections could be turned into games of their own, and I really hope in the future that we'll get some kind of survival mode, where you can play in these different scenarios for an extended period of time. You have the chance to fight a couple times before reaching Grimora, but as she's about to start her fight, the game deletes her mask, along with everything surrounding us. You shake Grimora's hand as she gets deleted as well. We're then taken back to the cabin with Leshy, who sounds very mournful at the deletion of the game. He asks if we want to play one more game, and even gives us back the exact same deck we had upon beating him for the first time. Things start to get deleted around you, eventually with the scale being removed. Leshy is so desperate to hold on to his final moments that he says it's not a problem, and continues to play anyway. He says that while the floppy disk was hidden away, he thought he'd never play again, but was joyous when we booted the game back up. Like Grimora said previously, Leshy warns us that there's certain things on this disc that shouldn't be seen. Eventually, the bell is deleted, along with all your cards. Leshy accepts his fate, and shakes your hand before being deleted as well. Finally, we're transported to Magnificus, who tries to bargain with us, telling us to remove the disc and save whatever's left on it. Magnificus knows what his fate is, however, and also implies that along with his death, Luke may be joining him very soon. We're elevated on a pedestal, and are given a jewel disc. As an attempt to delay the game's completion, he gives both you and him ridiculously large health bars. As I said with the Grimora fight, the amount of effort here for a short segment is absolutely incredible. This time with 3D rendered models appearing in front of us, with squirrels being replaced with gems, and a number of new cards which we've never seen before. Magnificus at one point starts painting on a huge canvas, painting the pink moon, and trying to dissuade us once more from having the game be deleted. As the battle progresses, things just get more and more corrupted, until once again everything disappears around you. Unlike the others though, who accepted their fate and wished you well, Magnificus holds on for just a bit too long, and in the process doesn't get to shake your hand before his demise. All that's left is our little 8-bit figure, and moving up we eventually come across the woodcutter. They once again tell us about the old data, and how we shouldn't look into it, before being deleted as well. We make our way up and come across a broken file, and upon clicking on it, can see that we've just unpacked the old data. Several images flash up on the screen, quickly being covered by large black redacted bars. However, looking back at the footage, there's not a lot we can even piece together when looking at this stuff. There's some random pictures, a text talking about someone called Barry, as well as an ID card with some old fella on it who's also called Barry. Whatever else is shown launches Luke into a panic, taking the disc out of the drive and smashing it with a hammer. The scene cuts to black, as we're immediately brought to what we can assume is the next day.
Hey Luke, this is Herman from the Herald, just following up after the message you left me this morning. Do you have time to talk right now?
Yes, thank you so much for getting back to me.
No problem, Luke. If I understand you correctly, you've got some video footage that might expose some malpractice on the part of a game publisher, Game Funa?
Yes, that's right. Firstly, I have a game of theirs that took control of my PC for a bit, which can't be legal, and then this woman from the company came to my house, and she...
Okay, hold on a second. Let me just get my pen and pad here, okay? Okay, so you have a game of theirs that took, was it a virus or something?
I told you!
Luke is on the phone with someone called Herman, who works for a place called the Herald. From the way he talks, it makes us think that Luke might be trying to take some legal action of his own, noting malpractice on the behalf of Game Funa. Luke starts explaining the entire situation to Herman, however halfway through gets interrupted by a knock at his door. Luke picks up his camera and answers the door, being shot immediately by the woman who visited last time. We see her enter the house, presumably to reacquire the copy of Inscryption, and as she makes her way back towards Luke's body, she turns the camera off, taking us to the credits. Now, as you might be thinking, despite us uncovering all of the secrets within the game itself, there's still several lingering questions and strands which can actually be elaborated on when looking into the ARG. What makes this extra exciting is that due to how quick I've analysed the game, there are still ongoing discussions and investigations happening right now, which if you're interested in the lore, I heavily encourage you participate in. You might be thinking, like me, what was the point of anything? And my only answer to that is the experience. You start off the game as your standard pack opening YouTuber, who eventually comes across a dark secret in the form of the Inscryption floppy disk. Not only does it contain sentient beings who tap into your computer and become aware of your presence, but also contains some background info on the creation of this game, as well as an old data file which refers to someone known as Barry, which leads us down a whole nother rabbit hole. It's very interesting looking at some of the conclusions which have been made of this stuff, primarily in a Google Docs file which I'll leave in the description, which compiles all this info and starts putting the pieces together. This Google Docs file revealed several more secrets and ciphers which I never even knew about, as well as showing the discovery of some websites like the Kaminsky data storage website, which actually ended up leading some people to the real life coordinates which Luke traveled to when finding the disk.
There's our big file. I believe we have our new cipher.
It's very interesting stuff, and I encourage you to check out how creative they got with this ARG. After Omori and Cruelty Squad, I truly believed games were going to start getting more boring and less creative, but Inscryption really proved me wrong. The gameplay was unbelievably satisfying and engaging, the art direction was uncompromisingly unique, and it has to go down as Mullins' best game to date. Anyways, that was the video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure to subscribe with notifications on so you know whenever I upload. Like the video, share it to someone you know, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.